Jeon Jungkook, a successful and ambitious businessman, had always envisioned a perfect life partner, someone sophisticated, well educated, and confident enough to stand by his side in the cutthroat world of business. But life had other plans. His father, with a deep rooted respect for tradition and family connections, had arranged his marriage to Lee Wan, a simple village girl who had little exposure to this fast paced city life and even less education. From the moment they married, Jungkook resented her. She wasn't the woman of his dream. Her quiet demeanor, modest clothing, and lack of modern social etiquette made him cold and distant. He barely spoke to her except when necessary, leaving one alone in the vastness of their grand home. Though he never laid a hand on her, his indifference and disdain stung more than any physical bound could. Van, on the other hand, tried her best to adapt to her new life, but nothing she did seemed to please him. The more she tried to learn, the more distant she became. Slowly she fell deeper into a pit of loneliness. Jungkook's cold shoulder and harsh words began to affect her emotionally, and the emptiness she felt growing at her every day. One day Jungkook was preparing for an important presentation at his home. He heard her drop a spoon and his patience snapped. "Can you at least try not to make so much noise?" Jungkook muttered, not bothering to look up from his laptop. His voice was cold, biting. One flinched at his words, the slight clatter of the spoon reverberating in her mind like a shot. "I'm sorry," she whispered quickly, picking up the utensil. Jungkook's indifference cut deeper than any anger could. She had been trying so hard to fit into his world, to be what he wanted, but nothing she did seemed to matter. Her heart sank a little more each day. The silence continued between them until Jungkook abruptly stood, heading to his office. "I have an important presentation tomorrow. Don't disturb me," he said, his tone final. Ryan nodded silently as he disappeared behind the closed door. She felt an emptiness stretch between them, suffocating her. After he left, she noticed a stack of paper on tea table that in rush he might have left. A stack of critical files of his presentation. She, unaware of their importance, still carefully moved them aside. As she wiped on the surface in her nervousness, she accidentally knocked over a glass of water, spilling it all over the papers. When Jungkook, who had came back to collect them, discovered the ruined documents, his temper flared instantly, his eyes blazing with anger. "Are you completely useless? What did you do?" His voice was cold, venomous. He shoved the ruined documents towards her as they scattered on the floor. "I didn't mean to. It was an accident." Wine stammered, her voice trembling. Jungkook scoffed, his voice rising. "An accident? You are always in the way, always messing things up. You can't even do something as simple as cleaning properly. Accept it, you are completely useless." His words felt like a knife plunging into her chest. One blinked back tears, her hands trembling as he tried to form an apology. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But Jungkook wasn't listening. He was too wrapped up in his own frustration to notice the way her shoulders sagged, the way her breaths became shallow. "Sorry? Do you know how hard I have worked for this? And you ruined it in one moment because of your carelessness. Look at these. You have destroyed everything. These were critical for my presentation tomorrow. You can't even do the simplest things right. You have done nothing but make my life harder since we got married." He shouted at her, the venom in his voice piercing through her already fragile heart. Vine stood frozen, her eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. She wanted to explain, to apologize, but the words stuck in her throat. Jungkook's harsh words echoed in her mind, each one hitting her like a hammer. He couldn't see how broken she had already become. Jungkook stormed out without another word, leaving her standing there, tears streaming down her face. She collapsed onto the floor, her sobs quiet but heart-wrenching. She had been trying so hard, trying to be good enough, trying to be the wife he deserved, but it was never enough. She was never enough. Unbeknownst to Jungkook, Fan had been silently battling her inner demons for months. The isolation, the feeling of inadequacy, and the emotional neglect had worn her down. She was sinking deeper into depression, and now she was also physically unwell. Her body weakened from the stress and sadness had started to fail her. She was growing sicker with each passing day, but she had hidden it well, thinking Jungkook wouldn't care. After Jungkook's outburst, Wan retreated to her room, shutting herself away from the world. Her heart ached, but her body ached even more. She didn't have the strength to keep fighting anymore. The next few days passed in blur, and Wan grew weaker, her spirit fading along with her health, her body giving into the illness she had been ignoring. She didn't get out of the bed, barely ate, and felt the weight of her world pressing down on her chest. Jungkook noticed that she was quieter than usual, but he assumed she was sucking over their argument. He brushed it off, focusing on his work, unaware that Wan was slowly writhing away. He continued with his life, busy with work and unaware of the storm raging inside his wife, until one evening when he came back home early that he realized something was seriously wrong. He found Wan lying on the bed, her face pale and her breathing swallow. She hadn't gotten up all day. Panic surged through him as he rushed to her side. Wan, called out, shaking her lightly. What's wrong? Wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, but they were unfocused. She looked at him as if she didn't recognize him, and it sent a chill down his spine. He scooped her up in his arms and rushed her to the hospital, his mind racing with guilt and fear. Hours later, Jungkook sat outside Van hospital room, his head in hands. The doctor words echoed in his mind. Severely malnourished and dehydrated, her depression has taken a toll on her body because it has gone untreated for too long, and she has been sick for quite some time, and her body is starting to shut down. If you hadn't bowed her in when you did, she might not have made it. She needs immediate care or we could. Jungkook felt like he had been punched in the gut. He had been so blind, so consumed by his own resentment that he hadn't even noticed his wife was dying right in front of him. He entered her room, his heart heavy. Wan lay there, looking fragile and small, looking up to IVs and monitors. He sat by her side, guilt choking him. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see. He whispered, his voice breaking for the first time. For the first time, Jungkook felt fear. Fear of losing the woman he had thought so little of, the woman he had taken for granted. He sat by her bedside, watching her fragile frame, guilt quickening at him. He had been so consumed by his own expectations that he had failed to see the person suffering right in front of him. One eyes fluttered open, weak but conscious. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had always been so quiet, so accommodating, but now there was a sadness in her eyes that Jungkook couldn't ignore. I tried. I tried to be what you wanted. She whispered weakly, her voice barely audible. Jungkook just tightened. No, it's me. I was wrong. I should have. Van closed her eyes, her face turning away from him, too tired to continue the conversation. She was too broken to hope for change anymore. Jungkook sat there, realizing the depth of the damage he had caused, not just to her, but to their marriage. The coldness he had shown had pushed her to the edge, and now he wasn't sure if he could ever repair the damage. Now, the real question was, could he become the husband she needed before it was too late? As Wan slowly recovered, Jungkook was there every step of the way, his cool exterior cracking. He saw her in a new light, not as the person he had imagined to her to be, but as the person she truly was, kind, gentle, and far stronger than he had ever given her credit for. But as he watched her heal physically, he knew that the emotional bond would take longer to mend, and he wasn't sure if she would ever forgive him or if he deserved it. After Vahan was discharged from the hospital, everything changed. At first, Jungkook thought things might improve. He had spent every moment by her side in the hospital. Guilt quickening at him, he thought that maybe, just maybe, he could make things right. But when they returned home, he had maids and helpers taking care of the smaller things he never did. But Van was no longer the same person. Cease no longer greeted him when he came back from work, no longer tried to engage in a small talk. The quietness between them, which had once been the result of Jungkook's indifference, now felt like an impenetrable wall. Ryan had distanced herself so completely that it was as if she had retreated into a world of her own, one where he didn't exist. One evening, Jungkook returned from work and found her sitting on the couch. She was staring blankly at the window, her eyes unfocused, her body was still, and she didn't even notice when he entered the room. Hours passed, and she remained in the same position, unmoving. He walked over to her cautiously, unsure of what to say. "Ryan?" His voice was soft, hesitant. She didn't respond. It was as if she didn't hear him. "Ryan?" He repeated louder this time and gently touched her arm. She blinked slowly, turning her head to look at him. There was no recognition, no emotion in her eyes, just the hollow emptiness. "Oh, you are home." Jungkook swallowed hard. "Yeah, it's been a while. Are you okay?" Ryan didn't answer. Instead, she stood up as if on autopilot and walked past him, heading to their bedroom. Jungkook watched her retreating figure, feeling a deep sense of helplessness wash over him. She was slipping away from him, and he didn't know how to bring her back. The days dragged on. Ryan's behavior only grew more concerning. She would sit for hours, the same spot, staring at nothing, lost in her thoughts. If she slept, she would remain in bed until the maid came to wake her. It was as though she had forgotten how to live, how to function. Jungkook would find her curled up in bed in the middle of the day, her body motionless, her breathing shallow. He tried talking to her, but every attempt was met with silence or a vague nod. She wasn't living, she was merely existing, dragging her breath from one day to the next, and it terrified him. One morning, Jungkook stood by the bedroom door watching as the maid gently shook Van awake. Her eyes fluttered open, but she didn't move. She looked so lost, so disconnected from the world around her. The maid returned to Jungkook, concern etched on her face. "Sir, she has been like this every day. She barely eats. She doesn't speak much. I think she needs help." Jungkook heart clenched. He knew she needed help, but he didn't know where to begin. He had been the cause of her pain, the reason she had fallen so far into this dark abyss. How could he be the one to fix her now? Later that evening, Jungkook sat down next to her on the couch, the silence between them heavy. He took a deep breath, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ryan, I know I hurt you. I know I did things that I can't take back." He paused, waiting for some kind of reaction, but Ryan continued staring at the floor, her face devoid of any emotion. I never realized how much you were suffering. I was so focused on myself, on my own expectation, that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed on. I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm sorry. Still no response. Jungkook's chest tightened as he reached for her hand, gently holding it in his. Please talk to me. Just tell me what I can do. From brief moment one, eyes flickered as if she heard him, but the light quickly faded. She pulled her hand away and stood up, her movement slow and deliberate. I'm tired, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jungkook's heart sank as he watched her walk to the bedroom once again, leaving him sitting in the emptiness of their home. She was slipping further into the void, and he didn't know how to reach her. He realized that this wasn't something he could fix with apologies or kind words. One was too broken, too hurt, and it would take more than just his regret to heal her. He had to find a way to help before she disappeared completely, before he lost her forever.